It is Sunday morning, and it is the 3rd of September 2023, and I am reading out of Eyes of Horus. This is a life of Joan Marshall Grants. It is one of our far memories, and she's living the life of Ra, son of a priestess of Ra. She's male in this life, and it plays 3,500 years BC. He's about 16 here, I think, and he's met his girl in his dream. We're at part 3, and this is Daughter of the Hare. When I went to Rodan later that morning, I found him studying some plans which an architect had made for a village to be built to the west of Hotep Ra. He looked up when I came in. "I have news from your father, Ra. He wishes you to go home for a few days, but you need not leave here until the new moon." I was surprised his father usually sends such messages direct to me. I wonder why he wants me. "I can let you know that, though I think he would prefer to tell you himself." "Has anything happened?" And then I added, perhaps because I was still thinking of the girl beyond the river, "Has Kiras decided to get married?" "No, though the question of his children's marriage seems to be occupying your father's mind." "You mean me?" He nodded, and I went on. "Well, I needn't go home to discuss it with him again. He brought up the subject before I came here, and I told him that I already knew whom I was going to marry, so it was no use his planning an alliance for me." "Ra, why did you never tell me you were betrothed? You have become a son to me, and I should like to welcome her as a daughter." Then I told him of the girl and how we loved each other, though we hadn't met on earth since we were born. It was much easier to put it into words than it had been to father, or even Kiras. "You do understand, don't you, Rodan?" "Of course," he said, "even the little that Dardas told you should have been enough to show that I find nothing strange in a reunion of friends who may not have met for several centuries." "Then will you tell father there is no point in going to discuss it with him?" "I'm afraid I can't do that. He has already made his plans before sending for you." "Well, he'll have to unmake them. He married a woman whom he really loved, and I'm not going to betray everything I believe in just because he thinks it would be expedient to have an alliance with an adjoining gnome." "You told me you didn't know the name of your love, or where she comes from." "I don't, but I shall recognize her as soon as we meet. I can't prove it. There are few realities that one can prove except in one's own heart. Surely you don't think I ought to betray the woman I love?" "Have you forgotten the story of the man who dreamt of a gold scarab, which had his name on it? In the dream he was told that if he wore the scarab on a thong round his neck, he would be eternally young. He left his house and travelled to far countries, but he never found the scarab, so he spent a lifetime in search of it. Once he had been rich, but all his wealth was expended on his many journeys, and when at last he returned home, his only companion was an old hunting dog. His house was in ruins, but one room was still standing. There were some musty straws in one corner, and he crept in there with his dog to sleep. During the night he heard the dog scratching at the mud floor, and he felt something like a smooth pebble roll against his hand. He picked it up, but was too sleepy to open his eyes to look at it. The next morning, a woman from the neighboring house heard the dog howling and went to see what was the matter. She found the old man had died in his sleep, and in his hand was the scarab he had searched for so long to find. For 50 years it had been buried under the floor of his own house. He had never been told that the greatest treasure is often to be found at home. "You mean I ought to go back to stay with father until my love comes to find me? I told her I was going to look for her. She will be waiting for me." "I never said you shouldn't search if it is necessary," said Rodan. "I only suggest that it's sometimes wise to look first in the obvious place. Your father wishes you to marry the daughter of the Hare. For that purpose has arranged for her to stay with Kiras, to give you an opportunity to meet each other without formality. If she's not the girl whom you love, you are under no obligations, and if she is, will you then refuse to marry her?" "Except in very hot weather, I seldom slept during the day, but when I left Rodan, I went to my room, closed the shutters, and lay down on the bed. I will dream of her, I repeated to myself, over and over again. She must tell me whether she is the daughter of the HARE, and I must bring her answer back. At last I went to sleep, but woke none the wiser. I began to think she was the daughter of the HARE. How would she tease me when I told her that I refused to meet her when Father had suggested it nearly a year before? Perhaps she wouldn't believe I had ever dreamt of her. Hadn't she said, I may pretend not to recognize you? If I had a present made for her before we ever met, she couldn't help but believe me. Nobody makes such beautiful things as Neku. I will go to him at once and ask him to design a necklace such as no other woman can match. I think my eagerness to see the drawings must have shown him that it was intended for a betrothal gift. The rayed pendants were graduated to the shape of a young crescent moon and were alternatively of red and yellow gold. Each pendant was tipped with a gold oryx, those at the shoulder small as my little fingernail, and in the center perhaps 3 times as large. It seemed almost impossible that it would be ready in time, even though all Neku's pupils worked on it together. But on the 10th day the necklace was ready to take with me when I returned home. I had thought that the daughter of the HARE would not arrive until the following day, yet when Kias met me at the landing stage, he told me that our guests were already with us. I'm almost sure you'll like her, said Kias. She's not at all fat, and I think she must have been teasing when she said that she might be. Then you think she's the girl I dreamt about? Kias looked surprised. Isn't she? I thought she must be when I heard you had agreed to come home to meet her. I don't know, but I'm sure to recognize her if she is. I think she's rather shy about meeting you. She wouldn't come down to the river with me. She said you wouldn't wish to be troubled with visitors when you had only just arrived home. Kias and I went up to the house together, and on the way I showed her the oryx necklace. She's lucky to have such a lovely present, said Kias rather enviously. I wonder if it will ever have a husband, whether I will ever have a husband who is thoughtful enough to make me something like that before he has even seen me. When are you going to give it to her? This evening, or when you are officially betrothed? I'm not sure whether I'm going to give it to her at all. Only the woman I'm in love with is going to wear it, and if I never meet her, it will be buried with me in my tomb. Late that evening, I was again on the same path with Kias beside me, but this time I was striding back towards the landing stage. You can't go away like this, Kias was saying. Father is so angry he has shut himself in the papyrus room, and you won't come out. And I don't think the HARE really believed your story about an urgent message from Hotep-Ra. It was the only excuse I could think of. I'm sorry to spoil your clever little scheme. It wasn't my scheme. It was Father's. He said you were too old to go on being in love with an imaginary woman, and it was only because you had never met anyone suitable to marry, and when you did, you would fall in love with her. How could I know she wasn't the woman you wanted? I thought you were going to be so happy, and when you were married, there would be lots of banquets, and you would come home instead of going to Hotep-Ra, and I wouldn't have to go on living in an enormous house with an old man who's sometimes unreal as a tomb painting. Now everything is spoiled, just because she's not what you imagine she ought to be. It's not my fault, I said desperately. I made it perfectly clear to you and Father that I would find my own wife. Why did you lead Rodan to believe that no word had been spoken of betrothal, and that she was coming as your guest, so that I could meet her casually? How do you think I feel being put in position where I've got to behave like an ill-mannered lout? You and Father and her father all pretending to be indifferent, yet watching me meet that poor girl like bird snarers, who see 2 fat wildfowl walking under the net together. Rahab, do stop behaving like a fool and come back to the house. You can't run away like this. Think how awful she'll feel. You think how awful she'll feel? It's not my fault. Even if her friends do know that this was to be a betrothal visit, she will be able to tell them that when she saw what a boorish young man Hotep was, she refused to marry him. Of course you'd rather I married her, though it would make us both thoroughly miserable for the rest of our lives. I think You're being infuriating, said Kias, who now was having to run to keep up with me. She is a very nice girl and much prettier than I expected. You can have a secondary wife if you want to later on. I happen to be one of the eyes of Horus, though you seem to have forgotten it, I said coldly. We are supposed to set the standard by which other people can find happiness. When I marry, or if I marry, it will only be when I have found a woman with whom I can take the oath of the new name. Marriages of expediency may work admirably with many people, but I'm not one of them. If you can't see anything higher, you will be perfectly justified in letting Father find you a suitable husband. But I can see something higher. So if I were to fall in with your clever little plan, I should be worse than if I took my pleasure with a foreign concubine who gives the hospitality of her body to any man who pays for her. I heard voices ahead of us and knew that we were close to the landing stage. I was glad that my servant had been able to carry out my orders so quickly. Evidently the boat was ready. Kia stopped. It's no good my coming any further. Nothing I can say will make you change your mind. Suddenly I wasn't angry with her anymore. I put my hands on her shoulder and looked down at her face, pale and anxious in the starlight. No, Kias, I must go. It will be easier for all of us. Make any excuse you like. Say I had to go because of the watchers. It's true in a way, for I should betray them if I did anything else. I opened the little box I was holding in my hand. This necklace will go everywhere with me until I find the only woman who shall ever wear it. Don't ever be satisfied with a lesser love, Kias. You and I could be so very happy with a person we really belong to, and there can be no loneliness so terrible as being married to a stranger. You are sure she was a stranger? Quite sure. Then I'm glad you're going away. Forgive me for making things so difficult for you. I will, if you'll promise me something. What is it? That you too will wait until you find your love? I promise, said Kias. Wow. So, I might read another chapter later, and I'm wishing you all a very nice Sunday. Maggie.